If you've been lonely your whole life, this is for you. You don't have to keep going that way. Stay with me the following minutes, and I will not fix your life, but I can change the way you move through it, so you don't spend the rest of it lonely in all the wrong ways. When I say loneliness, I don't just mean someone who lives alone with no partner and no friends. I mean the kind of life where you always feel slightly wrong in every room. Where you go home from work, from family dinners, from dates, from parties, and feel that drop in your chest that says, no one here really knows me. I mean the life where you start to believe that this is simply how it is for people like you. So this video is for two kinds of people. The ones who are physically alone a lot, who don't have many people to call, who spend evenings scrolling or working or distracting themselves because they just don't know where their people are. And the outsiders, the misfits, the ones who feel like they were dropped on the wrong planet, who can sometimes blend in, but never really belong. If you stay on for the whole thing, I want three things to happen. First, you will be able to name the kind of loneliness you're in, instead of just calling it a vague sadness and blaming yourself. Second, you'll choose one specific thing you start doing that actually increases the chance of real connection. Real connection. Emphasis on the word real. And third, you'll stop reading being alone as a life sentence and start seeing it as a strategic season, a building period rather than proof that you're unwanted. Before we go any further, a quick note. Everything I'm talking about on this channel, in my free guide for people who won't fit in, and in the FIRE formula, is built around exactly this problem. The world was not built for you. It never taught you how to choose rooms and people that can actually hold you. And you learned very early to abandon yourself in order to be tolerated. If you want to go deeper after this video, both the guide and the FIRE formula are linked for you. They were made for this. Now, back to you and the next 40 years of your life. I said 40 because that's how long it took me. And I don't want it to be the same for you and for anyone really. Let's start with 3 truths most videos about loneliness politely avoid. Truth number 1. You can be more lonely inside a relationship than you are when you sleep alone. You can share a bed, a mortgage, children, a calendar, and still feel like you are living next door to the person and not with them. You can spend 20 years telling yourself you are lucky to have someone, while a quiet part of you knows that no one in that house has ever really seen you. Truth number 2, if you keep shrinking to be chosen, you will always feel unseen. You can become sweet, easy, low maintenance, agreeable. You can cut off the parts of you that are too intense, too opinionated, too alive, and people may like you more. They might even love you. But they will love a costume. And deep down, you will know that the real you is still alone backstage. Truth 3. If you stay in the wrong rooms long enough, you start to believe that you are the problem. If every environment is too shallow or too harsh or too loud for your system, if every group makes you feel like a foreign object, you eventually stop thinking maybe this is the wrong room and start thinking maybe you're fundamentally wrong. That belief alone can lock in decades of loneliness. None of these are your fault. The world was not built for people who feel as much as you do, who see as much, who need depth and truth like oxygen. You were not taught how to choose rooms that can hold you. You were rewarded for blending in, for performing, for being useful, not for being honest. And you learned again and again that when you show your whole self, people often back away. But here's where responsibility comes back into your hands. If you don't learn to see these patterns and interrupt them, time will keep passing. You will keep repeating the same cycle with different faces. Another year, another job, another almost relationship, another city, same empty feeling. That is what I mean by 40 years of loneliness. Not a curse from the sky, but an unexamined pattern on repeat. So let's name what kind of loneliness you are in right now. You might recognize yourself in one or in all three layers. Here's layer 1, logistical loneliness. There simply aren't many people in your life. You may work from home, live alone, family far away or not emotionally close. You don't really have someone to call at 2 a.m. when things break. Weekends are quiet. Holidays are complicated. There are literal empty spaces in your calendar and in your home. Layer 2, relational loneliness. There are people around you, yes. Colleagues, family, partner, acquaintances, maybe even a social life that looks fine from the outside, but the conversations stay on the surface. Your inner world stays underground. You edit yourself in every room. You are never fully relaxed because you know that if you said what you really think, if you showed what you really feel, the dynamic would change. You are surrounded and still starving. Layer 3, existential loneliness. This is the wrong planet feeling. You walk through the world like you are visiting a foreign culture. The things everyone is excited about do not move you. The things that shatter you do not seem to touch them. You feel like your settings are just different, too intense, too sensitive, too detached, too something. Life feels like permanent translation. Pause for a second and be honest with yourself. Which of these is loudest for you right now? Logistical aloneness, relational starvation, or planet mismatch? There's no right answer. There's only clarity, and clarity is power. Because once you can say, this is the kind of loneliness I'm in, you can stop trying to solve it with the wrong medicine. You can stop thinking a partner will fix existential loneliness. You can stop thinking more social events will fix relational loneliness when the real problem is that you never let yourself show up unedited. You can stop thinking there is something wrong with you when the rooms you are in are simply not built for your kind of nervous system. Let me bring this down from the clouds with a piece of my own story. There were years when I looked very much not lonely on paper. I had work, I had people around me, I had things to post online that looked like a life, like a good life. But I remember nights where I would sit on the edge of my bed with all the lights off and feel like I was the only human being on the planet who was actually awake or alive. I would go through the day performing the version of myself that felt safest in each room, then come home and feel this huge gap between who I was and who anyone ever got to see. It took me a long time to admit that my problem was not social skills or effort. My problem was that I kept choosing rooms where my real self would never fit without being cut down. I kept accepting connections that were almost right instead of holding out for something that could actually hold me. I kept abandoning myself to avoid being alone, and the cost was that I ended up lonelier than ever, just with more noise around me. Okay, so what do you do instead? How do you make sure the next decade does not look exactly like the last one? Well, first, you stop reading alone as proof of failure and start treating it as a strategic season. If you have spent years or decades performing and self-abandoning, you actually need time away from the wrong rooms so that the system can reset. The season of aloneness is where you get to hear your own voice again. It is where you figure out what kind of conversation you crave, what kind of energy feels safe, what topics light you up instead of draining you. Without that, you'll just walk back into the next available room and just repeat the pattern. Second, you pick one thing you'll start doing that increases the chance of real connection. Not 100 things, one. Something that puts you in the path of people who are more likely to understand your wiring. That might mean joining a small online community aligned with your values, not a giant screaming platform. It might mean going to a local event around something that actually interests you instead of generic networking. It might mean starting your own tiny ritual that involves people, like a weekly gathering, a book club, a creative group, even if only 2 people show up at first. The point is that you stop waiting to be discovered and start sending out a clearer signal. Outsiders often carry this fantasy that their people will somehow stumble into their living room. In reality, your people are also hiding at home, thinking the same thing. Someone has to go first, and it has to be you. Third, and this is the uncomfortable one, you decide one pattern you will no longer feed, one way of abandoning yourself that you are just done with. For example, you might decide that you will no longer chase people who constantly leave you on red and only come back when they need something. You might decide that you'll no longer stay in group chats or friend circles where you always leave feeling smaller and more drained. You might decide that you'll no longer pretend to be fine with crumbs of affection just to avoid conflict. You don't have to fix every pattern at once. You choose one that is obviously poisoning you, and you start there. Every time you interrupt it, you reclaim a bit of your future. This is where the responsibility piece becomes powerful instead of heavy. Yes, the world was not built for you. Yes, no one taught you how to choose rooms that can hold your full temperature. And yes, you have been taught your whole life that you have to trade authenticity for attachment. None of that is on you, but your next 10 years are. your next 40 years are. You cannot control who shows up. You cannot control whether some mythical soulmate or best friend appears on schedule. What you can control is the kind of life you are building in the meantime. A life that is more and more compatible with the kind of connection you actually want. A life where the way you spend your time would make it easier, not harder, for the right people to actually recognize you. That is why in my work I talk so much about building a life around your real self, not your performance. Because until you do that, even if someone wonderful walked in, they would not be meeting you. They would be meeting the mask that you constantly put on. So, as we close, I want you to hold 3 simple moves. Name the loneliness you are living in with precision instead of shame. Shame has no place here. Choose one pattern you'll stop feeding, one way you'll stop abandoning yourself. Choose one action that makes it more likely for your people to find you, even if it feels small and awkward at first. And then look at your aloneness not as a verdict from the universe, but as a construction site. You're not behind. You're not defective. You're building the kind of life where the right connections can actually survive. If you stay with that, you'll not be spared every season of loneliness. No one is. But you will not live your whole life without understanding why. And that alone can change everything. Thank you for being here with me today. See you next time.